Hi, I'm Ariel. You're watching She Wants the Diction, and today I'm going to be doing a recent reads. I have not done a recent reads in a hot minute, because I'm bad at consistency, and also, I don't know, I just haven't really felt like doing one, but for some reason I do. So that's what we were going to do today, which is going to be a pretty chilled out video. So I'm just going to start off with the one that I most recently finished. This is Black Boy by Richard Wright. This was very much a raw, brutal, unflinching account of his childhood growing up in the Jim Crow South. And so for that reason, it wasn't my favorite thing ever to read, but I don't necessarily think that all narratives that have like some sort of trauma or just like are very heavy or have a lot of like negative things happening in them like aren't important. Like I still think this is a very important work, but I didn't love it and I didn't love the things that were happening to him and like all the things that he had to go through in this book. But I still think that it's so inspiring, especially for somebody who's a writer, because from the time of him being a child, he wanted more for himself. He wanted better. He wanted different things. He wanted to become a writer. And he didn't let anything that anybody said deter him from raising enough money to get the means to go north and pursue his passions. And, like he learned how to read. He fucking hustled. He stole when he had to. He was starving throughout most of his childhood and young adulthood. And I mean, so this is by no means is it easy to read, even though I don't think it doesn't have that overwhelming quality to it. Like when I read Zora Neale Hurston, for example, I get like really emotional. Like I feel like it's just like it makes you tear up. This I think is much more like detached. Like it's still sad, but it's not going to make you have a breakdown. It's just kind of unpleasant, if that makes any sense. Yeah, I gave this 3 stars. I still think it's an important work, and I think this is going to give me a lot of perspective when I go to read, his other works like Native Son. I think that's really going to give me insight into, the way that he's writing and his characters and all that. So yeah, so I definitely don't regret having read this at all. Okay, the next thing that I'm going to talk about that I started, it's called The Shallows, What the Internet is Doing to Our Brains. And I am actually reading this one on my Kindle. In case you are questioning why I have a Kindle, I bought this literally years and years ago. Might have been even before I had a channel or anything. I definitely don't condone buying books through Amazon. In fact, I didn't. I usually kind of use this as a last resort when, the library doesn't have a book and I don't want to waste one of my requests for the month, on a very mainstream, well-known white author. I would rather reserve those for, a black author, a queer author, somebody who is outside of the white male-dominated, literary sphere, if that makes sense. So I am reading a copy that I obtained of this book, if you know what I mean, on my Kindle. And the reason that this kind of sparked my interest is because I kept having a lot of conversations where people would bring up The Social Dilemma to me, like the Netflix documentary, if you can call it that. And I made an attempt to watch it, and it was just terrible, in my opinion. I mean, there's already the irony of something telling you not to use social media that's hosted on Netflix, who literally creates social media phenomena every time that they drop a new original series. We saw this with Stranger Things, we saw this with Tiger King. Social Dilemma is a big deal, and I feel like we just keep seeing this with thing after thing. So not only is it kind of just ironic and kind of hypocritical that they created a whole social media campaign surrounding The Social Dilemma to promote it, but I also feel like it's just very biased. Right off the bat, it's just kind of it's fear-mongering because, they play ridiculous, scary music. There's all these dramatizations of evil AI that are producing ads for you on the spot and sending them out, and it's just, I feel like it's really just meant to scare people instead of giving them legitimate information. I don't appreciate things that try to emotionally manipulate me instead of just presenting the facts. And so I was looking into this more because I think a lot of people are taking this documentary very seriously. They're social media is destroying my life, whatever. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be critical of it. I just think, the truth is not one extreme or the other. It probably lies somewhere in the middle. And so I'm interested in learning more facts, because I tend to be the opposite. I really hate all these straight white tech bros who are kind of coming out and saying, we created a monster and we hate the internet is terrible, social media is destroying our life. Like, I am very much of the perspective that social media gives marginalized people who may not have much of a platform, or anyone who listens to them in real life, it gives them, somewhat of a platform, some place to come and connect with people. If you were socially isolated in real life, which I tend to be, that's partially because of who I am. It's partially because of social anxiety, partially because of, just the place that I live. It's a lot of factors. And I think the internet can be great for, people who suffer from social anxiety and depression, and help us feel connected even when we can't physically leave our homes. Even people with disabilities, which is, that's a marginalization that recently has really come to my attention, and I'm starting to think about that more and just consider that when I am reading. But to go back to the point, I tend to, I think, have a mostly positive view of technology. I do things like, turn off my notifications. Like on Instagram, I turn off my notifications for likes, because likes are kind of meaningless if you think about it. Like, to see that so-and-so liked this, it's like they saw it, like they didn't actually say anything. It's not a helpful exchange to see 40 different names liked this. And some of y'all may think that's kind of savage, but, like, you kind of have to, like, curb the addiction where you can, and also, like, logging out of it when I'm done with it, trying not to get back on, stuff like that. So I feel like I tend to have very much an opposite yet cautious view. Like, I feel like I'm pro technology, and I think it does more good than it does harm. But I also think it's like kind of a neutral thing where, it's not technology that's good or evil. It's not good or evil. It's man uses it for his own means, and it's the man that is, using it for good or bad means, or just neutral means. And yeah, so I kind of feel like technology is a neutral thing, but that's just my opinion. And so I'm wanting to get more educated on it. Like, I want actual research, facts, statistics, studies that can maybe, and I want to be challenged. I want to be challenged. I mean, I could be wrong about the fact that the internet may be doing something terrible and irreversible to us, like this may all be an episode of Black Mirror or something. But that is the reason that I'm reading this. I wanted to get more educated, and I wanted to be able to have something to say when people around me start talking about how bad social media is. And I wanted to have, like, actual facts and be able to discuss it intelligently. So that's the reason that I'm reading that. And I'm only 25% in, so I kind of hesitate to comment on something I'm only 25% of the way into. But I think it's good so far. And it's not, like, too extreme. Like, I always fear that a book is going to be very biased one direction or the other. And like I said, I'm looking for, like, the truth. I want the facts. And I mean, every human is biased to some extent. But yeah, so far I'm enjoying it. I feel like it's challenging me, like, right out the gate. Like, immediately this author addressed, like, my viewpoint, which was, technology is neutral. It's not really doing anything to us. Like, we impose our will on it. And the author, like, directly, like, within the first chapter was like, a lot of people say this. And I was like, oh, well, that's me. And so I was immediately interested because, my main argument or mode of thinking about it was immediately challenged. So I'm excited to see where that goes. I don't know that it's going to, change my mind or change the way that I use social media, like, drastically, but I'm just interested. Now I want to read a lot of books about, like, I've always been interested in technology and the internet, and I've always sort of been, like, a user of the internet. And so I want to read more about it. And I have a lot of other books that I'm wanting to look into, surrounding the internet. Like, for my boyfriend's mom's husband, sorry, I bought him for Christmas a copy of Permanent Record by Edward Snowden, because I'm just buying everyone books for Christmas, as I do. I haven't read that yet, but I'm wanting to read it myself because I know it's from a dude, again, some white tech dude, who turned and said, they're spying on people, they're keeping your records, all this stuff. Like, he was basically like a whistleblower. And so I'm wanting to read, his account. I'm also wanting to read The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, which I think was going around BookTube, the book community a lot last year. So yeah, I'm interested in reading more books on technology, and I have a lot of other subjects that I'm wanting to dive deeper into next year instead of getting distracted by, like, whatever the book community trends are. Like, I'm going to try to read more to my specific interests, and that is definitely one of them. So the next thing I'm going to talk about that's kind of related to this, I started this today. In The Shallows, the author talks quite a bit about the idea of neuroplasticity, which until recently was not accepted by science. It was not proven by science. But now they know for a fact that like our brains are plastic. You know, they can change the neural pathways. The ones we reinforce over and over are the ones that become dominant. And, you know, that's how habits are created. And, you know, you can rewire your brain and all this other stuff. So I remembered seeing this book called Neurosculpting. And I think I originally saw this on Sage's channel. And I will link their channel. It's called Sage Reads. And I've been like talking about them in every video recently. There's really no reason to that. It's just like, I like to cite trying to start citing like where I first saw things or first heard things or what have you. So I will link the video where they talk about this, but it's called Neurosculpting, a step-by-step program to change your brain and transform your life by Lisa Wimberger. And, you know, when I first heard of this, before I knew that neuroplasticity was a thing, I was kind of like very skeptical of it. I was like, well, that sounds made up, you know, but I'm never totally closed myself off to anything, if that makes sense. Like, I'm open to listening and reading just about anything up until the point that I feel like I hear something that I can't, like, it's either an outright lie or, you know, it's very biased or it's just blatantly, I don't know how to describe it, but I will give anything a chance once. So I remembered that I had seen this book called Neurosculpting, and I'm listening to the audiobook on Sage's channel. And so I went ahead and picked it up because it related to something that I was already reading in here. And right off the bat, I did not like it. First of all, I believe it's the author that narrates it, yes. And she has a very odd way of narrating where she takes like long pauses between random words. Like, she doesn't speak smoothly like a professional audiobook narrator would, which some people might like and some people might dislike. I disliked it. It really, really bothered me. I'm trying to stop saying drove me insane, drove me crazy, whatever, just because, you know, and it comes to my mind so often, but like I wanted to say it right there, but I am trying to work on correcting like ableist language, and, you know, crazy and stupid and dumb and all that stuff, idiot, are kind of part of that. And I feel like I'm really bad about that. And honestly, okay, this is a tangent, but I always thought that people that were complaining that was ableist is like, well, that's kind of extreme, you know, that's kind of over the top. It's kind of, you know, some sensitive snowflake ass bullshit. But after reading the couple of books, the very few books on disability that I've actually read, I'm starting to realize that it's like, why do we think of people with disability as like, that's the insult, like that's the negative, that's the lowest of the low. Like, the worst thing you could be is, you know, not smart, or, you know, not have this ability. And so it's just, it's kind of gross. And it really has been nagging at me. Like, even now when those things come out of my mouth, I'm like, oh shit, in my mind. I'm like, damn, you know, I should stop saying that. But I can't think of like good replacements that don't sound like utterly ridiculous. So it's hard. I want to modify that language because I do think it's very like casually ableist. And, you know, maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's just how I feel, and that's what I've been trying to do. So I thought I would share that little tangent with you guys in case, you know, you were also realizing / struggling with it. But anywho, now I don't even know what I was talking about, but oh yeah, her really weird narration. Well, there's that, and then also within the first 3 minutes of this book, she talks about how she has taught this neurosculpting technique to a lot of law enforcement officers. And, you know, right off the bat, I'm just like, great, this book is written by a cop lover, and she's teaching me techniques that she teaches to cops. And I was really interested in learning the techniques, you know, anything that could potentially help manage, you know, depression, anxiety, anything like that, I'm definitely interested in, even if it's kind of outlandish or out of the box or, you know, not that commonplace. But this, as soon as I heard that, I was like, this is not going to be a good experience for me. And then she goes on to talk about how a lot of, you know, cops, EMTs, etc. suffer from like hypervigilance. And I just kind of had to laugh to myself because I was like, you know who's fucking hypervigilant in this goddamned racist fucking dystopia that we live in? Fucking black people, fucking people of color, fucking queer people. Fuck a cop being hypervigilant. Like, I'm hypervigilant, bitch. And it's it's just one of those things where it was like, you could tell who it was written for, and it's very obviously like a white middle to upper class, you know, like affluent, yoga-y type of hippy dippy person. And I was just like, I'm not the audience. She doesn't even consider how, you know, she's talking about law enforcement. And I know that up until this year, a lot of people, myself included, were not fully educated on, like, I knew that police have obviously racial profiling and bias towards, you know, Black people, but I don't feel like even I fully knew how bad that it had truly gotten. And so I don't fault, you know, this is not to like roast Sage or something for, you know, not mentioning this or not being aware of how this comes off to people of color, you know, because we're all learning and growing. But I would recommend, if I were you, if you're Black at all, I would steer fucking clear of this book. I don't know how far I made it into this. Let me see real quick. It's only like 6 hours long, but yeah, I made it about an hour and a half in, and I just couldn't take it anymore. Like, I don't even think I got to any of the actual techniques in here. Like, that was how annoyed I was at the way that she was narrating and the way that she just kept emphasizing that, bringing up that she trains cops, and I was like, it's written by a cop lover, and I just like could not deal. Like, sometimes I can power through an audiobook and just, you know, ignore what I don't like and take the rest. I've done that with several books that had like a very Christian bent to them, but with this, I don't know, I couldn't take it anymore, so it's probably going to be a did not finish for me. The other thing I will say is that she very much appeared to be talking down to her audience, like almost so simplistic and so repetitive that it was like kind of condescending, but obviously different people may have different opinions. That's just how I felt about that book, so yeah, I would super avoid that. Okay, the next thing I kind of want to talk about is this little book called How to Find Fulfilling Work by Roman Krznaric. Probably butchered that. I'm also trying to stop saying like that I butchered a name or that like I don't know how to say a name, because at this point I think it's assumed that I don't know how to say names. And this is apparently something from the School of Life series deal thing website, but this was like a 4-hour long audiobook that does exactly what it says. I gave it 3 stars, and it's very much a general overview towards attitudes about how to pursue a more fulfilling career. You know, it has all the kind of like standard advice, you know, like shadowing people who are in careers that you think you might potentially want to do, sitting down and having conversations with them, kind of like mentorship type stuff. Like, it's nothing mind-blowing, but what I did find interesting was the way that he kind of gave an overview of different views of work, like through time and from various famous people, and like this idea of the Protestant work ethic. And he just kind of gave a general overview that I found, well, not exactly, you know, revelatory. I think it's a great jumping off point for like, well, it sounds ridiculous to say, but this was like one of the best bibliographies that I've ever heard, because like he didn't just give a list of the sources. He like explained what was good about the source and like why you should check it out and stuff like that, which I've never seen before. So I thought that was cool. But I mean, he mentioned all kinds of things that like I'm interested in reading. He mentioned a book called The Paradox of Choice, which basically is going to talk about how, you know, we get this kind of like paralysis when we have too many choices, where it's like overwhelming, and so we make no choice at all, which is kind of something that I do so often, and also in regards to life and like what I want to do with my life. I feel like it's very applicable, and so I'm really interested in reading that book, you know, just because, I mean, you even go to the grocery store and you have the option of like 50 different types of pasta, or, you know, you go to get food out and you have like 50 different restaurants to choose from. Like, I feel like never before have we had so many choices. So I'm wanting to read that. He also talked about the biography of Marie Curie that I recently purchased. Like, it's a very old book. It's like early 1900s it was published. So yeah, just mentioned a bunch of stuff that I'm really interested in watching or checking out and kind of pursuing more ideas about this. Okay, the other thing I've kind of been casually reading is Sister Outsider by Audre Lorde. Now, I already read this for the first time earlier this year, but I won an actual physical copy in a giveaway, and this is pretty much the same on the inside as the original copy. I'm hoping they fixed some of the typos, but it appears to be exactly the same, and the only thing they changed is like this updated cover. I can't say I'm like in love with this cover or anything, but I mean, I don't hate it. The other cover wasn't that great either. So I've just been I haven't been doing like an official reread of this. And the first time that I read it, I think I gave it like 3 stars, which you might say, well, that's very low for, you know, Audre Lorde. Like, she's a queen, like she's the OG, you know, like she has all this incredible wisdom to share. And so you might be like, well, why did you rate it so low? I think I really didn't like the travel essays as much. And also I read this straight through, and you have to understand, like, this is not an easy read. I'm not going to lie to you. Like, this is a difficult read. She packs so much into so short of a space that you really have to slow down. And that's something that I'm not used to as somebody who just, zips along. It's sort of something that you have to like sit with and return to, because I think about things from this book all the time. And so it's not a book that like, I probably was reading it wrong. Like, I shouldn't have been reading it straight through. I should have been like giving this time to sort of digest. And I can see myself revisiting some of the things she says, over time, because even my understanding of these essays the first time I read them, like the transformation of silence into, language and action, I don't feel like I fully took the messages to heart, fully understood them, but now I feel like I'm like gaining an understanding. And it's also interesting because I never thought of Audre Lorde as disabled, but when Chadwick Boseman passed away, which just happened recently, there was a lot of like discourse on Instagram and stuff about how, he had cancer, he was disabled, and I never knew that cancer was considered a disability, but, when you think about it, it is. And so, yeah, Audre Lorde had cancer as well, so I'm wanting to read her, like, cancer journals and, obviously pursue her work further. And I do think I should have, like, I would rate this higher now. It's outside the norm of what I'm used to, but it is very, very good. Like, I literally think everyone should read this. Feminism needs to be intersectional. So if you are a white feminist especially, I would say read this. It might be challenging for you if you are new to feminism, but if you've been, like, consuming a lot of feminist content for a while, I feel like you need this. Everybody needs this, truly, because I feel like it's for us, and it's also, it's for more than us. Like, it's for all feminists. I mean, all people should be feminists, but all feminists, And so, yeah, I've been kind of doing a very casual reread of this, like, an essay every other night or something. I've also started this hefty and absolutely gorgeous boy. I don't know why I called it a boy. On the back it says, "An archive of collective memory and exuberant testimony, a luminous map to navigate an opaque and disorienting present, an infinite geography of possible futures." And this is a gorgeous coffee table book that I believe just came out within the past couple weeks or so. It is extremely thick. The librarian, when I checked this out, was like, "That's a heavy book." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's a coffee table book, and that's why." And she was like, "Yeah." So that was funny that she like commented on it, but I'm the first person to have my hands on this. Absolutely beautiful. Like, I love just like iridescent stuff, like the design of this, just like a bunch of art, a bunch of articles. Like, it's very much like mixed media, and it's very thought-provoking. Like, I'm only 32 pages in, and this page right here is talking about the Flint water crisis, and there's just so much in here, so many different things. And yeah, I'm just thinking this will just be a gorgeous experience to kind of spread out over like days and days. And I'm thinking maybe at some point at doing a video on like black coffee table books, because I have read a few this year, like photography books. I don't know, there's not a lot of text in them, and I'm thinking about just making a video like talking about them and maybe showing them, but I don't know. I always say I'm thinking of some video idea that I never end up doing, but and I don't know if I want to talk about, do I want to talk about boys and sex? This was an audiobook by Peggy Orenstein that I listened to a couple days ago, and I had already read her book Girls and Sex earlier this year, and I had really, really, really liked it. Like, it was probably one of the best nonfiction books that I read this year. And I also want to do a video on the best nonfiction books that I read this year. If that tells you how many videos I want to fucking do. But I really, really liked it. Not as much as Girls and Sex, but I mean, I think that's just because I could relate more to Girls and Sex. Obviously, I'm female identified, so kind of makes sense. But it was interesting to hear the flip side of the coin, because what she does is she directly interviews these teenagers and then talks about the trends and, how they approach sexuality and hookup culture and all that kind of stuff. And it's super interesting to hear it, like, straight from them. And I like the way that she reports on it and writes on it. And the bottom line of these works, which I really, really like, is that she talks about how abstinence-only sex education is absolutely not enough, and not enough people are hearing that and taking that seriously. Even parents, I feel like, are not taking it seriously. There's a lot of parents who just don't have a sex talk with their kids or the talk, period, much less giving them like actual helpful, correct information about, you know, birth control, condoms, etc. I feel like the books can be read by anyone who's wanting to learn more about sexuality, but it is kind of like talking to parents at the end, which I think is good, because I know I personally, like, I never got a talk, like, at all. Just had to figure everything out on my own, and that's just absolutely wild to me with something as potentially dangerous as, you know, sexuality, and thinking that, you know, teens are just going to abstain is absolutely ridiculous, absolutely not the case, and I don't know why, you know, parents and the government and authority act like that's going to be the case. You know, no one likes to think of their kid having sex, just like no one likes to think of their parents having sex, but it's a reality, and like, we need to educate kids because this inevitably harms mostly, you know, girls, women. And I mean, I'm not saying it didn't have effects on the boys, but it's definitely more drastic and life-altering effects for the girls. I like that she expanded a bit more in this book. She seems to have taken the criticism of girls and sex to heart, and she did try to expand. She specifically interviewed some Black teenagers and, you know, spoke to them about their experiences, you know, dating, interracially, etc. And then she also interviewed some like queer men, male-identified people. And so I like that she took that criticism and she actively tried to improve. The bottom line of both of those books is still the same. But I enjoyed fleshing out, rounding out, getting the full picture. In the near future, I am wanting to read, this is kind of similar, which is why I bring it up. This is called For the Love of Men, A New Vision for Mindful Masculinity by Liz Plank. And so it's kind of a similar thing, talking about the societal, cultural expectations of men and talking about this idea of toxic masculinity and how can we change it? How can we bring up boys to be different, grow up to be, you know, better men? So yeah, highly interested in this. I wish there had been an audiobook because that's how I get through my nonfiction for the most part, but this is what there was. And I think that is about all that I have time for in this video. If you guys have read any of these, please let me know your opinions down in the comments. I hope you are having a happy holiday season, whether or not you celebrate. I don't know. I don't know what you celebrate. There are so many different holidays. I don't know, maybe you don't celebrate at all. I personally am a Grinch, so me and my boyfriend don't do shit. There's no tree in our house. We get each other gifts sometimes, but the only thing that I'm really wanting to do is bake molasses cookies. Like, that is my Christmas time, the one thing that like I need in my life, molasses cookies. And I'm gonna have to, like, I looked up a keto recipe because I'm on keto, and I could cheat, but I don't really want to cheat just because it's not worth it. Like, you just kind of feel bad and like bloated and shit. So I'm kind of wanting to like try out keto baking, which I haven't done yet. So let me know what you guys are doing for the holidays, if anything. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in my next video. Peace.